Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of TimeShift. I'm your host, Tandy, and today we're going to be joined by the one, the only, Eric Froehlich. Say hi, Eric.
Hi, Eric.
I love that that's just become the bit. Everyone does it. I love it.
I thought I was coming up with something new there, but no.
We started doing it on Versus Live a while back with director Rob, and he would always say hi, Rob, and that became his go-to shtick. So I'm glad that we're kind of continuing on with that trend. It's nice. So Time Shift is a new feature that we're doing where we just go over an iconic match from your past. So today's match, we're going to be watching you play against Tom Martell in the top four of the Pro Tour Gate Crash. So this format was obviously the Return to Ravnica block, right? Where all the dual lands came back, and it was like multicolor all over the place. What deck did you play in this tournament? You want to give me a little rundown about it?
Yeah, so I played a fairly unique deck. It feels weird to say like a deck of my own design because of course I got like some kind of shell from something online.
Yeah.
It's not like I just came up with something out of complete thin air. And there are various evolved decks that came around um, in the format, but this deck was definitely unique for the tournament. It was only myself and Brock Parker who played it, and it was kind of centered around Gyre Sage, which I believe
Oh,
was a
I
two
love
mana.
Gyre Sage, dude.
Yeah, so I called the deck Gyro Ball, but which was a callback to Daisuke Mitsaka. I can't say his name, Daisuke, but the pitcher for the Red Sox who threw a Gyro Ball. And yeah, the deck was basically a bunch of big, efficient creatures. A decent number of them had haste. And then that kind of played well with Domri Raid, which gave your creature, you could fight with it or use it to basically draw extra cards with creatures on top of your deck. And the only spells, I think there's 24 lands, 4 Domries, and 4 Mizzium Mortars, and 28 creatures. So that was kind of the deck. And Burning Tree Emissary was a thing, which of course is still a thing in formats like Pioneer. And that's kind of just a good creature with Evolve and allows you to keep going. I think the most interesting thing about the deck was that it was Naya, it's 3-color deck, and fairly heavy green, Gyre Sage deck, but also every land in the deck cast Boros Reckoner, which was, of course, a triple Boros hybrid mana
Yeah.
card, which you'd think it would not be very easy to cast with a bunch of green lands in your deck, but that's how good the mana was back then. So.
Oh yeah, the we watched a lot of standard matches a few days ago where we had the buddy lands and that combined really well with the shock lands from Ravnica to allow what it was essentially a perfect 3-color mana base. You needed like 2 of each basic, and then you could play 12 duels and 8 to 12 of the buddy lands depending on what was released at the time or whatever. And that was essentially everyone's mana base for every 3-color deck. Give or take a Moorland Haunt or something here and there. But I love the idea of this aggressive slanted green deck that played Mizzium Mortars. I love Mizzium Mortars. That card seems so sweet, and when you can overload it thanks to the big mana generation from Gyro Sage, that just seems kind of sick.
Yeah, obviously a great card in the creature matchups. Although back then, one of the decks that my team, which was Channel Fireball, was very heavy into the Jeskai deck, which played a few creatures. I know it had Restoration Angel, Augur of Bolus. I think there was another, maybe Snapcaster Mage was at the time, and so very spell focused on that deck. Although killing Restoration Angel is still a good thing to do. But that was one of the big decks, and then they ended up switching off that deck to the point that I think only Jerry Thompson ended up playing the Jeskai deck in the end from our team, and to basically a creatureless or very very close to creatureless Esper deck that really wasn't trying to win with creatures. I think it still had the Resto Angels and Augurs in them just because that was what everyone was doing. But the number one kill condition was Nephalia Drownyard, which just milled people
Oh
out.
yeah.
And so Mortars was not, this like universal all-star necessarily, but
Hmm.
it definitely, in limited it was unbeatable, and then of course in featured matchups it does a lot of work.
I remember getting it a few times in limited, and I cannot imagine ever losing a game where you got to overload it. It was kind of messed up. So
Well, so I haven't gone back and watched this match or anything really in the top 8. But I did do a time shift with Marshall on his YouTube channel for my round 16 winning in for top 8, where in the final game I top decked Mizzium Mortar's Overload to wrath my opponent and kill them. So
sick.
that definitely comes up.
Yeah. So this match, you're playing against Tom Martell, and were y'all on the same team? Did you say for this event, or have y'all ever been on the same team before?
Um, I don't think we've ever been on the same team before, but we've played the same deck before. So, Tom, for a period of time, was not really testing Magic, but he was still showing up at events, and obviously he was just naturally good. So, I think it was Paris when we played Callblade, where we just gave Tom our deck like the day before the tournament, and he
Nice.
ended up making top eight in that Pro Tour. But I don't think I've ever actually tested with him like on the same actual testing team. And for most, like I think for almost every other event, he was on a different team, like variations of the Pantheon. I know for this one, his deck was designed by I believe Sam Black, and
That's my take on it as well.
yeah, that's how I remember it at least. And then I think they had maybe like John Finkel or other. I don't even know if Finkel himself was actually playing in this event, but that type of group of kind of Northeasterners who kind of work together on decks like this.
All right. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the match in question. This is the top four semifinals of Pro Tour Gatecrash between yourself and Tom Martell. Okay, so for this event, your Gyro Sage deck, had you played against Tom Martell or anyone else playing the Aristocrats deck before this event or before this match?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No.
Did
Zero
y'all
times.
did y'all test a bunch the night before for this matchup at all? Did you really get any insight into what you're supposed to be doing or anything?
Not a single game. I'm not even sure I necessarily knew everything that was in the deck. Also, interestingly enough, I know that Tom and his team tested quite a bit of his quarterfinal matchup where he was playing against Melissa DeTora, and not the matchup was bad. They found it to be the worst matchup anyone had ever played in their lives.
Oh,
Like
cool.
they could not figure to the point I remember Tom telling me that he was so discouraged with this that they just gave up and just like there's no point, we're not testing this anymore. It's just there's nothing to learn. It's unwinnable.
Okay.
And I also like again my memory's still a little fuzzy on a lot of this stuff, which is weird because growing up, my memory was my biggest strength. Like I was the type of person who could go to class, sleep through the whole class, and retain the entire lecture. Like it was basically a superpower.
That sounds crazy.
And
How's that even possible?
I mean, the way that my brain worked on retaining things that I just kind of heard passively, let alone that I focused on, was really powerful. And now I'm just one of those people who doesn't remember where they put their keys or why they walked into a room, even though they had a purpose. So getting old has been rough, but yeah,
I think our big
I
brains can only hold so much information, right? Like eventually you just start to forget stuff because you can't hold everything, you know?
I don't know.
Maybe
But
we
yeah,
got to
I
purge a
think
couple
that
thousand magic cards from our memory, you know?
that'd be nice. But yeah, I think that they told me that like the way that they ended up that her team ended up deciding to sideboard and do various things was so different than what they thought was remotely possible that everything just kind of shifted so dramatically. And yeah, Tom ended up pulling it out. I don't know how many games ended up taking. I feel like he kind of won in a rout, but I don't really know.
Yeah. So here we have Tom Martell deploying some threats to the battlefield. Doom Traveler, Cartel Aristocrat. Those are cards that a lot of you may know from Brad Nelson playing his Junk Aristocrats deck. He used that to win an event on the SCG Tour, and he wrote a ton of content about it. This is kind of the original iteration of that archetype. It played a lot of these low to the ground human style aggro elements, and then kind of peaked with combo elements with Cartel Aristocrat and Sacrifice effects. Silverblade Paladin was not part of these types of decks for very long after this, but here Martell's putting them to good use.
Yeah, I think that if we're being honest, like I think that this, I mean, spoiler alert, but I guess if you're watching a match from 9 years ago, then got to be prepared to
Statue
know the results.
limitations. Statute limitations.
But yeah, like I feel like a lot of people for a very long time kind of viewed this as being one of the weakest decks to ever actually win a pro tour. Um, it didn't work that well. Like, and I don't think anyone else had even decent results with the deck, and it didn't exist afterwards until people changed it pretty dramatically into a deck that I guess functioned a little bit better. Like this deck, I think had 4 Champion of the Parish and maybe 15 other humans. Like not a lot of human creatures in the deck, period. And
It
like
yeah.
some of them are like doom travelers and stuff. And so it's just like, yeah, there was just a lot of things that it was a weird deck. And I think it had like 2 copies of Lingering Souls, which doesn't really combo with a lot of the other things, but it's a really powerful card, but doesn't
Yeah.
really work with a lot of. It's just like, I don't know. It was bizarre.
It was bizarre. I will say this though, it actually ended up being the progenitor to what Brad Nelson used to call
Right.
Act Two. Like you said, the dramatic changes came pretty shortly after this event because the post sideboard games that feature Blasphemous Act and Boros Reckoner allowed for some really explosive finishes, and then Brad took that, put it into the main deck, combined it with more Lingering Souls and Tragic Slips and stuff and Blood Artists, and then you just had combo kills all the time out of nowhere, and that's where the aristocrats really came from. I think that sacrifice
Mhm.
synergy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's clearly elements here that work. I mean, you can see various energies that are just beautiful and work really well with a lot of cards in the format. But then there's kind of a lot of other stuff that, yeah, there's definitely synergy with Champion of the Parish and having a handful of humans. But like, it's not very powerful when like look at what my creatures are. Like my creatures are 3/3s for 2, like extreme like 2 for 1, 3/3s for 3, and
Yeah.
then locked in on Smiters, which are 4/4s for 3, and then Hell Riders and Thundermaw Hellkites, and these creatures Thragtusk, like the big thing in this format is Thragtusk Resto Angel too. And so being able to get a 3/3 champion of the parish going on turn 4 is like that's not really an exciting play.
No,
Yeah,
I
so
agree. I
it
agree.
just kind of missed.
So one thing I like about Martel's deck, and I'm not going to gush too much about it because it did change quite a bit. But for this event specifically, I think Blue White and Jeskai Flash were like some of the most played decks, and even Bant Flash. I
Mhm.
think Melissa de Torres was playing Bant Flash if I'm not mistaken. But those decks had trouble with early 1-drop starts if they didn't have early removal. And I don't know if Pillar of Flame was legal or seeing a lot of play, but I just remember like the Champion of the Parish, Doom Traveler Slant. Sometimes it lets you on the play take that aggressive role against those slower control decks, and then you would kind of drain the resources and then finish them off with Falconwrath, Aristocrat, and the like. And I do like that aggressive element to the deck, but I do think that the Boros Reckoner Blasphemous Act version that became the new version of this deck afterwards ended up being better. But it's interesting to see where it spawned from.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know how true that is really, just because like the Bant deck, first off, the creatures, it had Augur of Bolus, which is really good against Champion of the Parish in a lot
That's
of ways,
fair. That's
especially if you
fair.
can't grow it quickly. Then there's like I think she was playing Centaur Healers to go into Resto Angels and 4 Resto Angel, 4 Thragtusk. So you have to really get out
Yeah,
ahead quickly.
that's
But then
fair.
also the deck was playing 4 Azorius Charms and Supreme Verdict. So like it was very hard to commit too heavily to the board, and then if you're attacking with one creature, the charms really blow you out. I mean, detention sphere was in this format too, so like if you're playing multiple champion of the parishes, like there's just a lot of things that you could run into trouble with.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, of course, if you get out ahead and they don't have an answer, it's great. But like the deck really had a lot of answers.
No, that's fair. I mean, even this game, we're watching his aggressive slant, right? Is just getting brick walled by Boris Reckoner. It's a classic
Hmm.
situation of can't attack and can't block because every
Yep.
block ends up being like a mini 2-for-1. Cartel Aristocrat prevents that a little bit because you can block and sacrifice to prevent the damage. Um,
Mhm.
but you're taking this aggressive role with your Boris Reckoners, even though there's 2 Silverblade Paladins on the other side of the table. So clearly, they're not that threatening.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, also Boris Reckoner is just a pretty messed up card for the format.
It was so good. I remember one of the first weekends it was legal on the SCG tour. Jerry paired it with Harvest Pyre, and then like everyone was just like, "Oh, Boris Reckoner Harvest Pyre is the new build of this deck," and I was like, "Oh wow, that's pretty insanely powerful."
Yeah, that was in his top 8 deck. I'm fairly sure too.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got a Flinthoof Boar and a Mizzy Mortars take care of a Silverblade Paladin. Martel takes a draw step. He's got a handful of expensive cards, one of which is a Zealous Conscripts, which does work extremely well with Cartel Aristocrat. 2 of which I believe were Falconwrath Aristocrat that are just kind of rotting in hand. No land, though, just another 2-mana 2/2, and it looks like you're in a commanding lead here.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to come back from these type of situations, especially like I don't think I think all the Blastno stacks are sideboard, but
Yeah.
Blastno stack not a great card against Boros Reckoner.
Ooh, here's a weird question. Is this during the era where it was 2 pre-board and 3 post-board? Or
No.
it's just 1 pre-board and then 4 post-board games?
Yeah, that didn't come. That was pretty recent. I feel like.
Well, define
Like,
recent because I'm pretty sure it's been since like
like
2015 or something. That's pretty far away.
really? Oh, I thought it was much more recent than that. Like,
Oh,
I
you
thought
could be
that was
right. You could be
like,
right.
I thought that was only used in like the last year or so of Pro Tours, which again is not super recent because we've been in a pandemic for 2 years. But
Yeah.
I thought it was only 3 or 4 years ago, probably like 4. But I thought it was only used on the Pro Tour for maybe 2 years or so. Let me think. Yeah, definitely. My last PT top 8 was the Marvel PT. I think that was 2-3. So I guess that was a decent length ago. So you're probably right, but
Hey, fast forward through the other matchup here. Is this? Yeah, this is back. All right, so we're here for game number 2. Do you have any
I
remembrance
think
on
this
how
is
you
game
side?
4.
This is you're in his game 4.
I thought it just said that Martell leads 2-1.
So it just skipped over 2 games on coverage, so it could show the other side of the other bracket. I guess that's unfortunate. Oh well. Okay. So, well, I guess that's a good question. Is that Honey in the background?
Yeah, Honey and Bauer. There's someone's delivering a package somewhere, and they are not handling it well.
All right. Well, do you have any recollection on what happened in the 2 games off screen?
I think I'm fairly sure what happened in the 2 games off screen is that I stumbled on lands and he rolled me. Like that's. I mean, you can probably kind of gather that's probably the case. With Tom was a very methodical player,
Yeah,
and we did not fast forward a lot of real time, and he won 2 games, including shuffling and everything.
that's fair. That's fair.
So, as I remember, I feel like I just kind of stumbled a little bit, and he did not, and just crushed me. I think one of the games was with the 4-1 Flyers, the actual aristocrats. I guess they're called, right? Falconmouth Aristocrat, maybe.
Yeah, Falconrath Aristocrats, the 4 drop, and then Cartel Aristocrats, the 2 drop, and those were the things that gave the deck its name. So we're here for game number 4. Martell is taking a 2-1 lead. Your hand looks like it's pretty decent. A Gyre Sage on 2, perhaps Boris Reckoner into Garrick Relentless on 3 and 4. And Martell's hand looking kind of weak. Just Tragic Slip and a Boros Reckoner, huh?
Yeah, he mulliganed this game, and of course, the mulligan rules have changed many times throughout the years. But this at this point, it was just you just draw 6 cards. There's nothing special. I don't think there was. I don't think was there Scry yet. I guess there was Scry. Was that
Yeah, it was
no?
the London Mulligan, right? Or not London Mulligan, the Vancouver Mulligan.
No, Vancouver was well afterwards, right?
Oh wow! So it was just straight up Mulligan to
Yeah,
6. No takesies,
had to be.
backsies.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just you get what you get, and going to 5 is a death sentence more often than not. Bad foreshadowing, I guess, but
Interesting play here from Martell. I would have. Isn't Gyre say? Is it a 0-1 to start or 0-2 to start?
it's a 1-2.
It's a 1-2 to start. Oh wow. Okay. For some reason, I was thinking Gyre Sage was a 0-1 and that Tragic Slip was looking kind of juicy, but Martell here going to save it for a bigger creature, and Boros Reckoner going to probably come down and put up a little brick wall. Pacifism's a heater. Tell me about that one.
And like the main deck for this was, I think, was really strong. A lot of really good elements, but man, it just did not spend a lot of time working on the sideboard. Um, I think pacifism. I brought it in maybe twice in the tournament, and it was like the last round was like a win, and I was playing against the Jund aggro deck where I think they were really good, but really there weren't a lot of creature matchups, and definitely not a lot of creature matchups where the creature didn't necessarily have like a really good ability. Like you want to get off the board, but like Olivia, where
Yeah.
pacifying that is like okay, it's just delaying the inevitable, but
Yeah.
it's still miserable. So yeah, there was definitely just a lot of cards in my sideboard that just weren't well tested and not necessarily even well theorized. But also, this was not a deck that I really wanted to mull or to sideboard with all that much because it had like the 12 2 drops and 12 3 drops, and you couldn't really move very many cards and keep the game plan the same of being this like big but aggro deck.
Yeah.
And so, I was only looking to maybe sideboard in a couple cards. Like the Garrix, I think were the best card, and that came in a handful of matchups where like the more expensive cards just weren't necessarily as good. But like in what matchup do you want to like you never want to board out your 2 drops, and like what matchup would you ever really want to board out Boros Reckoner or a
Yeah.
3 mana 4/4 creature or Hell Rider or Thundermaw Hellkite? Like those cards just work very well together and are big and powerful, so it's like I don't know.
No, I feel you, man. So here's one thing I want to point out. So I remember playing this format vividly, and I remember Boros Reckoner being a nightmare for creature-on-creature matchups. And
Yeah.
I thought Pacifism was a genius answer to an opposing Boros Reckoner because it effectively dealt with it without dealing it any damage. And
Mhm.
in Naya Colors, there weren't really a whole lot of options. There's no Silk Wraps, there's no Journey to Nowheres in this format. Pacifism was it. And I've actually had another standard format that I played a Pro Tour in where I had Pacifism in my sideboard. Honolulu 2006, I think. Maybe it was 2005. But Hunted Wumpus was like a nutty sideboard card for the Naya matchups. And like, I just put 3 Pacifisms in my main deck because there was just so much zoo everywhere.
I mean, that was the idea, but also in practice, like with the way the format played out, first off, there just weren't Boros Reckoner decks. Like there was my deck, there was Tom's deck, and there was a handful of other Boros Reckoner decks. Like Joel Larson was playing Boros Reckoners in his deck that just had Restoration Angels. Like he
Yeah,
was playing
fair.
a control deck and had the ways to combo off with the Reckoner. So even with it being pacified, he could still combo off because he
I
has his
forgot about
Plasma Zax and he
that.
has his charms, and
Yeah,
like and he has Resto Angel, so like it's terrible in those matchups. So like in theory, I thought pacifism was like, oh, I did it, like I really solved it. And then in the tournament itself, like I said, I think this was only the second time I brought it in, which was like round 16 and the semifinals, and that's it. Like
sure,
that was
sure.
the reality.
Well, we can't all play such hits as pacifism in our pro tour decks like like you've been there a lot and sometimes you find the right answer and sometimes it doesn't work out. It's okay. But it is looking okay here. Tom might have his own Restoration Angel to blink it next turn. He's considering a block here, Boros Reckoner on Boros Reckoner. Now, if he puts that Boros Reckoner in front of yours, what happens? What do you do? What does he do? What do you think?
Uh, I mean, whenever someone puts a Boros Reckoner in front of your Boros Reckoner, you're almost like priced into first striking,
Yeah.
and
And then
then
And then it creates like a little mini chain where you end up getting a 2-for-1, right? It's not that bad.
I mean, do you get a 2-for-1 though? Because when they block with their own Reckoner, you're just back in the same nonsense cycle of them doing the same thing to you.
Sure, sure.
The problem is like the Reckoner is just so strong that like you're gonna it's gonna happen eventually. Like whether you get 2-for-1 this turn or next turn, it's just you're gonna keep losing things, and so getting stuff off the board is just has some value.
Yeah. All right. So Martellus done a chump block with the champion of the parish, and he's going to use the morbid from Tragic Slip to take care of the fresh Boros Reckoner you've played. And with that trigger on the stack, actually, it means that the Gyre Sage is not going to get the trigger. So heads up play from Martell there. But with 3 lands in hand, he's going to need some help off the top of his deck to beat what you got going on. Your hand, you've been missing land drops too. Your hand is just stocked.
Yeah, I mean this deck. At first, I thought that I was trying to think like how many lands I played in the deck, and that it probably should have like this deck probably wanted 25 or 26, and then when I thought about the entire deck list, I'm like, oh no, it had to be 24, which I think was probably on the light side for sure.
Yeah, cards like Burning Tree Emissary, I have a lot of experience with those in Pioneer and specifically with decks that play Nykthos and other mana creatures. And while the deck, uses Burning Tree to great effect with its Pips of Devotion, it's oftentimes just a 2 mana 2/2 and doesn't really add much to the mana base in your deck. It just adds to the explosiveness your Gyre Sages and your 24 lands, it seems like, are your only mana producers. And if Gyre Sage dies, sometimes you just don't have the mana to cast your 5 drops, right?
Yeah, for sure. But the deck is, by the same token, when you're playing like a Domri deck, and this deck really was a Domri deck, especially because it works so well with Boros Reckoner, and of course, just
Oh,
having
yeah.
Locked-in Smiters, which are just massive creatures for such a
Yeah.
cheap such a cheap price. Just every creature that doesn't really mess with your curve, like, is already a value because of Domri, but also, um, just having another 2-drop. Like, this deck didn't play Experiment 1, which I think surprised a lot of people, but also it was hard to cast on curve because there's only the 8 shocklands that produce green on turn 1, and playing Forest in your Boros Reckoner deck has some very real issues if you want to start going further down that route. And even if you do that, you're not going to have enough sources to necessarily play Experiment 1. And then for the 2-drops, there just really aren't a lot of great options. Like, Gyre Sage was kind of a find in that, okay, this is actually a thing that can attack for potentially 3 because of Burning Tree on turn 3 pretty often. But the number of times I use it for mana throughout the entire event is not that high. Like, first off, people of course kill it, but also it's just a beater. Like, it's its main job. I mean, of course, when you can cast a Thundermaw Hellkite, you do so. But the number of times where you're just casting a Hellrider and this thing's becoming 3 power and attacking with your Hellrider to deal massive damage is way higher than the number of times I'm using it for mana. So
That's fair. All right, so here we have a Luxon Smiter pre-combat. That's going to make the Gyre Sage grow to 3/4. And now if Boros Reckoner trades with Boros Reckoner with first strike damage, you actually don't lose a creature. So I think this is a really great play from you to put your creatures out of range from the Boros Reckoner tradesy damage. And Martel, with his back against the wall, already at 12 life, no pressure to on the swing back, no cards in hand of any relevant text. I think that you're in a pretty favorable spot here, so it looks like we might be going to game number 5 here in just a moment.
yeah, and my hand is of course gassed up, and his hand
Yeah,
he's flooded, so
yeah.
definitely helps too.
I love how they keep showing your hand of like the 4 gassers, and they keep not showing his hand because it's just 2 lands.
Yeah, not much to show. One of the most interesting things I always find from watching back on old coverage is seeing the people in the background and how many of them are like pretty high up Wizards employees right now.
Yeah, I
And
love
even
doing
more
that.
so in this event when you see Melissa on camera as well playing. But
All right, well, it looks like you're both going to do the first strike thing, and then Martel's going to go to face. You go to face. 14-9 looks like, and we'll see if Martel has any top decks here.
yeah, this is
Wow,
definitely a
another
tough
tragic
spot to
slip.
get out of.
Another tragic slip's going to take care of the Gyre Sage. That's going to cut you off of potentially 4 and 5 mana spells next turn, but with a Domri Rod and Luxon Smiter, even a Mizium Mortars, you can clear most of the threats that he could play against you here.
Yeah, I mean, also, I'm at a life total that is out of Blasphemous Act Boros Reckoner range, and he's, not very many turns away from just dying. And I found another Boros Reckoner to make that even worse. I think a lot of my issue was not really knowing all that much about this deck, having not played against it. I don't even know that I necessarily knew how all the timing worked with how things stack with Reckoners and Blasphemous Acts, and all the stuff in that kind of regard. So it was definitely a confusing match. Like, for me, I'm generally a very fast player, and I know a lot of this stuff was just kind of like, I'm not entirely positive how a lot of things work necessarily.
Well, it's important to take your time to really think about that kind of stuff. Inactive player, active player almost never comes up in competitive play. The last
Yeah.
time that it was a huge deal was during the Disciple of the Vault Arcbound Ravager era back in the mid 2000s. But in this scenario, if you have a Boros Reckoner and he has a Boros Wrecker and he casts Blasphemous Act, your both goes on the stack at the same time, but yours resolves first, I believe. So important to note that if you have a Reckoner, yours is going to kill him first, probably, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and so especially with everything that was kind of going on, and trying to figure out, playing top eight, it was a very tough thing for me. I can remember thinking about that kind of stuff and not really knowing exactly how it worked, and not necessarily playing optimally to try to plan for that, I guess.
Yeah. So looks like we have hands here for game number 5, Big 5-0. This one's looking a little lackluster. No 2 drops other than Mizium Mortars. You are on the draw, though, and it's a pretty attrition-heavy battle. Are you considering a mulligan here still, or have you already kept? Do you remember?
I well, I think part of it was he has already mulliganed, and that I thought my hand was strong enough um, to keep on the draw against the mulligan versus I don't know. I'm also a type that I mulligan much less than pretty much anyone.
Mm-hmm.
That has changed since that time because Seth Manfield was invented, and he will not mulligan any hand.
Oh,
But as
Seth.
far as but in general, I was very reluctant to mulligan, and this is the type of hand where I have a ton of draws that are quite good, and that I have 3 looks at 22 lands, which obviously is a massive favorite. But then I also have my 12 2 drops, and um, this hand I think is pretty good if I find most combinations of like there are very few combinations of cards where I'm going to find in the first 3 or 4 turns where this hand is just garbage. And having that 2 mana removal spell, which I am planning to use as a 2 mana removal spell, most likely is pretty strong. And now Tom's going to 5, and now at this point, I do remember what's going through my head. It's just like, please let me find the land. Like, just let me draw a land on turn
Yeah.
one. Thing is over
Just make it
because
easy.
honestly, at this time, I feel like I might have never lost a game where my opponent had mulliganed to 5 with those rules. I think
Wow.
there was some chance that was true. Just it's so hard to do. Like decks are just too powerful. Like the things that need to happen. Like odds are I probably lost a game and had forgotten, but it's just not a thing that really happens all that often. So also, people don't mulligan to 5 all that often either because
That's
you're
true.
kind of forced to keep a lot of stinky sixers. And without getting a scry, without getting to put 2 cards back with the 7, the odds of having a functional 5 card hand, I mean, especially in this deck, like his deck has a lot of cards that just really require synergy to even be playable, let alone to do things. And
Yeah.
so, it, yeah.
No, I mean that's how it goes though, like so he's mulliganing to 5, but like if he has a curve that's just like 1, 2, 3, 4 and you don't hit lands, like that's the classic screw versus flood type scenario where
For him to have a curve that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, it means that he's got to have kept a land that produces that mana that can come into play untapped with a 1 and a 2, and he's got to have drawn like that requires 8 cards to go 1, 2, 3, 4.
he doesn't have
So
enough. He doesn't have
you only
enough.
have 8 cards total. So that means you need to have kept a perfect 5 and draw a perfect 3. That just doesn't happen. Like the odds of that happening are so minuscule. But
It's a little awkward. His creature that he did play early was Doomed Traveler, which is actually not a great target for this Mizium Mortars. And his follow-up Skurzak High Priest. Now, this is a pretty juicy target. This is something I think you're going to be happy to kill.
yeah, for sure.
Now the big
Like
question
this
is,
is
do you give him a turn to find the Cartel Aristocrat, or do you just blast it?
right. Like this is one of those things where like he's down to 2 cards in hand with no board presence realistically, and it was one of those things that you can lose to.
Scary
So
stuff.
it's definitely worth thinking about, and
I love this play. I
I
love
don't
this
want to
play. You
lose
don't want
to
to
it.
risk it. If they play Cartel Aristocrat, it's so hard to kill that 5/5 flyer.
But right, but also my hand is all gas.
Yep, yep.
I don't necessarily like I need to draw lands at some point, but this game shouldn't be ending anytime soon. I'm taking 1 a turn. He's got 2 cards in hand. So even if he's going to play like a Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, he's got to have the land in hand and it, which is just also not super likely. And if this game takes too many turns, I'm gonna play Aurelia, and that thing just kills you basically in one go. So yeah, I mean it's just a time to kind of play safe, I think.
Well, that's pretty scary stuff here. Looks like Martel does have a Blasphemous Act in hand. He's a little far away from casting it yet, but does have Cartel Aristocrat he can play. Might want to offer the trade with Reckoners, but might want to save it to try to shotgun blast you down and steal the game,
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's funny he did have the Cartel Aristocrat, so if you hadn't gone for the Mizian Mortars, I think the game might have ended on the spot.
It would have come very close, that's for sure.
What a strange attack.
So this just looks like him trying to
Is this just a
set up
crazy
Tragic
bluff?
Slip.
Crazy tragic
Yeah,
slip
well,
bluff? Holy moly.
right. Like I can't block, right? Because this is, I mean, unless I don't care at all about getting slipped, but every point of damage is so valuable when he's trying to act me out, basically. So yeah, this is just a good play.
Yeah, that's a really good attack from Tom, but I'm not sure what I would do in that scenario. That's a tough one. You need to prevent your life total from dwindling at all, but the longer the game goes, like you said, the better. And maybe the block was better, but it's close. And I like your no block though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also not sure how true that even is with my hand. Like my hand is all highly benefited by having more creatures in play too,
Yeah.
with the Hell Riders and the Aurelia. So like, and also having my own Reckoner in play is stops Blasphemous Act from just killing me in similar fashion. But
Hmm. A lot of options here. So I see in your hand you have the 6-drop Aurelia. Was this a card you brought in a lot, or did you have it main deck?
I think this was the only time I brought it in potentially. Like I said, my sideboard was not too hot, and I don't even really I don't know why I brought it. If I'm being honest, thinking about it now, I mean, I knew that I had it in my hand in this game, but I never really went back and thought about why I brought this in or what it was really for. It doesn't seem particularly good in this matchup, and I don't really know what I took out, so I don't know. I think it was probably just wrong.
I mean, I watch myself back like watching old matches pretty regularly these days, and I see little plays and sideboard strats and stuff that I don't really necessarily agree with. But I find oftentimes that old me is smarter than current me because old me played a lot more of that format than current me. And I would trust your gut. I mean, it's a big flyer. Falcon Wrath Aristocrat was a huge deal. Lingering Souls might have been problematic. And maybe you just wanted a big flying haste thing, to really hammer it home once the dust had settled with Blasphemous Axe and such.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure. Like, is Lingering Souls in his deck anymore? My deck is full of Thundermaw Hellkites. I don't
Maybe
know.
not. Good
I
call.
mean,
Maybe not.
I don't know. Huh.
We're so far removed, it's interesting to go back and try to get back in our own heads.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's a follow-up Smiter and a Gyro Sage after an attack from the Boros Reckoner. Martel gonna look to try to... Honestly, if he can just squeeze in 4 points of damage here and cast Blasphemous Act, I think you're dead on the spot. Oh, he has another Boros Reckoner? What the hell?
So one of the weirdest things in life, and this goes to even more so with something like poker, and I mean it's just true for all these things. Going back and thinking about moments like this where like I mean now in my life I've played so many spots, so many pots of poker where the turn of a card or the equity was six figures. I've played hands where it probably was low seven figure equity pots with like deep in main events and things like that. And it's just so weird to think like if this deck had been cut one card deeper, if had anything had kind of just moved, shifted a single iota, like someone had breathed differently so that when you were shuffling, a card went one card deeper in one direction, like your whole life in a lot of ways is different. And that's
Yeah.
just such a weird thing to think about.
Yeah, with those of
It's
us who
probably
who interact with like a lot of random number generators all the time, that's certainly an interesting thing to think about.
so I was told that I punted this game and that I could win. I don't know if that means I could win this turn or I could prevent losing or again, I haven't gone back and really checked it out and tried to figure it out. Someone smarter than me whose brains works better than mine does nowadays or however it did back in those days can probably tell me, but
I think there are maybe 4 people in the whole world qualified to tell you if you made a mistake in this game at this point.
well, I mean, there it could, like I said, I haven't gone back. It could just be something obvious right now, where you watching it right now just go like, well, you shouldn't have done that, or you could have killed him with this. And so I don't know. Why don't we pause it for a second? Because like this turn, I could have used the Gyro Sage to play double Hell Rider. I don't think that can possibly do anything. Although I guess what it could do is I could prevent myself losing from a Blasphemous Act by doing something like that because I could just put him to 13 and
Right.
keep my Reckoner around.
Right.
Which again, it was just not on my mind at all at the time, being so unsure of like how a lot of those rules worked.
Mhm.
That if my Reckoner was alive, he can't kill me with Blasphemous Act.
No, that's a great
So
point. I mean, the double Hell Rider here, I didn't even see it with the Gyro Sage because the first one would put a counter on it, and then you could tap it for 2 green, and then you could play the second one with the mountain you drew for turn. So yeah, that could have dealt him at least 4 damage, put him at 13, and then Boros Reckoner, even if he has 26 damage coming at your face, as long as your Boros Reckoner isn't dead, he can't cast Blasphemous Act because he'll be at 13 or lower. So maybe that's the play, but I mean, like I said, this was kind of the first time I'd ever seen anyone play Boris Reckoner Blasphemous Act in a deck, and it was awesome. Like it was no, I mean, obviously it's going to come back here in a second. We're going to see, but like it was from a viewer's perspective. I wasn't at this tournament. Me and Brad Nelson. This was actually the one tournament where Brad missed in his whole Pro Tour career. He fell off for one Pro Tour. He hit silver or gold or something and just missed one somehow. And then we're just sitting at home watching and rooting Jerry on and hoping that he wins, and then he lost, and then we're watching you and we're rooting for you to win, and then we get to this spot and we just can kind of see the writing on the wall because of the sheer power. But it's so hard, even now looking back, having complete information, knowing both players' hands. It's hard to find the win, or it's hard to find the point where you don't lose. The games are so complicated. The cards have so much text, and just like the double Hell Rider thing, like I don't think I ever would have done that. He has 2 Boros Reckoners. You really gonna send 2 Hell Riders into 2 Boros Reckoners? Like you just lose your whole board.
right, and that's also the other thing is that if I'm attacking with anything, right? If I attack with any, like if I play Hell Rider and attack, he can block with Boros Reckoner and it's going to kill my Reckoner. So
Yeah.
it's not like it just locks anything up. It just changes the game completely if something like that happened. And let's say I play Aurelia and don't attack with Boros Reckoner. Well, if I attack with either ground creature, he can kill my Reckoner. Now that said, if he kills my Reckoner, I can kill his other Reckoner.
Right.
And we're basically trading off the whole board, which didn't seem good at the time because he's dead next turn, and maybe Blasphemous Act as being the way to lose was not on my mind as much because it just wasn't a thing that ever happened to me at the time.
Yeah.
But a lot of the more quote unquote simplistic, things that you would immediately think to do is like, oh, don't send the Reckoner in. Well, that doesn't actually do anything because Reckoner kills Reckoner if anything attacks. And if I just attack with Aurelia to get him a little bit lower, he's got Doom Travelers in play and a sack outlet, so he can just block it.
Yep.
So let's say I just attack with Aurelia, he goes 14. I think Aurelia gets to attack again. He goes sack Doom Traveler, block. I still die because he's at 14 and I'm at below 27, so I die there. So none of those things really do anything. The Hell Rider play again, I can't kill him, right? Like
You definitely can't kill him.
there's
Not
no
from not from
way.
not from 17. I think you can deal him roughly 8 damage, and then he just does easy blocks. Like he literally can go sack to give cartel aristocrat protection, chump block your Boris Reckoner with a token and sack it, put the cartel aristocrat in front of Gyro Sage or Smiter or Hell Rider, and then put another Boris Reckoner in front of the other Hell Rider, and then he just shoots down your whole team. I don't think the Hell Rider attack really does anything other than make you lose in a different way. So whoever said that you punt it, I think is just wrong.
No, because so let's say I do the Hell Rider thing. Um, there's definitely ways I can do it where the thing is clearing the board is not necessarily a bad thing because he's got one card in hand, and so he's gonna still have a small board. Like the aristocrat's obviously not gonna die, but and maybe he has a 1/1 flyer at the end of it. But that being the whole board, and then me being able to follow that up with Aurelia is still a winning, an advantageous position, although not nearly as good as it is right now. If I don't die, so maybe the goal is to just make sure I don't die. And if I'm attacking with creatures, he's forced to block with Reckoners, which is going to clear off the Reckoners. And the question is, maybe like there can he possibly kill the Gyre Sage if it's at a 3/4? I don't think
Well,
so.
he might have a
Because the
combo
record.
block, right? Because he can block Boris Reckoner on Hell Riders. The Cartel Aristocrat is going to be able to block with protection thanks to the Doom Traveler, and then the Boris Reckoner damage plus the Cartel Aristocrat blocking plus the Doom Traveler blocking. He can choose to kill your whole board. I think if you just played 2 Hell
No, I
Riders
don't
in
think
attack,
so.
I think
I
your whole
don't think
board
so.
dies.
No, because first off, I don't have to attack with the Smiter. So the
Sure.
Smiter would trade with the Doom Traveler, and then a Boros Reckoner could finish it off. And
Well, he
then his
doesn't. He
Boros
doesn't.
Reckoner
Yeah.
damage has to kill my Boros Reckoner. But the Gyre Sage just has 4 toughness, and it can't attack because I cast 2 Hell Riders.
That's
There's no
fair.
way he can kill that. There's
Okay,
no way he
so
has 4 extra damage.
but you're
So
kind of sending 2 Hell Riders to their doom to put him to 13, right?
yes.
Like, and I don't
Well,
that's not a play I think is that great. And he also can like leave. He doesn't have to try to kill your Boris Reckoner, right? He only has to try to kill it if he wants to Blasphemous Act you next turn. But if you attack with Hell Riders and put him to 13, then there's like very little reason for him to do that, because if he targets your Reckoner when his dies, you'll use your Reckoner to kill his other Reckoner to prevent that from happening. So I think he just leaves your Reckoner alone, puts one of his in front of a Hell Rider, Cartel and something in front of a Hell Rider, and then uses that to take care and uses the trigger from the one Boris Reckoner to kill the Smiter. And then I think that's it. I think you just lose. Basically, you have an untapped Boris Reckoner and a
the
tapped Gyre
Reckoner trigger
Sage.
won't kill the Smiter though, because the Smiter has 4 toughness.
If you attack with it, though, the Doom Traveler or the
Oh yeah,
Spirit
if it
token,
attacks, but
yeah,
then the Gyre Sage stays alive, and then his Boros Reckoners are both gone.
well, yeah, that's fair. Maybe that was the right play then. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know I just didn't think about it enough of trying to prevent and getting Blasphemous acted for the loss. Like I was more concerned about. Well, the thing is, can I lose to anything else? It's just, I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
It's tough. All right. Well, we've done as much talking about it as we can. Let's see the finale here for game number 5. Tom Martell with a Blasphemous Act in hand. Eric Froehlich has untapped a bunch of creatures with the Aurelia. That's what it did, right? Untapped a bunch of creatures when you attacked? Or
Yeah.
you... Yeah.
No, yeah, they're all attacked. So now he just has to figure out how to keep his Reckoners alive and not die, which is still hard, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I am attacking for 26 or whatever here, but
So he can go sack a Doom Traveler, make a flyer, give Cartel protection from green, and then
right. I think that's something else I didn't think about too much at the time, was that the Aristocrat can block twice because of the protection.
yeah,
As basically free blocks.
and the other Doom Traveler probably steps in front of the Luxon Smiter, so you just kind of fog the whole attack. Other than the Boris Reckoner, you take 3 down to 14. And then Blasphemous Act untap ends the game, pretty sure. So I think with this attack and Blasphemous Act in hand, Tom actually has the ability to just win the game. I think this is kind of a bad block. This is so sick. This game, this sequence. There's just so many permutations. It's so impossible to play around everything.
Yeah. I mean, it's also just so, again, like what I was just talking about like 2 minutes ago. It's like these are just 9 cards or 10 cards off the top of his deck. And really, if you had changed pretty much any of them to anything else, like if it's not the High Priest, so I'm not casting the Mortars and he's behind another turn, if he doesn't find the second Reckoner, if it's not Blasphemous Act, if it's not the Aristocrat to double block, if it's not the Doom Travelers to, like, it's so weird that you can't really change. I mean, you can make a slight variation somewhere, but like, it's just wild to think that, like, oh, if I just cut it 1 card deeper. It's probably a terrible way of thinking, but
I mean,
it's
maybe.
definitely the type of thing that goes through my mind so often with all of these things, where it's just like, well, of all the things you could have done differently, it would have been easier to just cut 1 card deeper.
Sure. So the extra combat phase from Aurelia is something I wasn't thinking about either. I knew that it untapped. I forgot that it gave you that relentless assault effect, but that card here makes the blocks a little bit harder from Martel's side. So it seems like he's kind of lining up blocks and figuring out a way to keep his life total above 13, so that his own Blasphemous Act Boris Reckoner doesn't kill him. But
also possible that I screwed up again here, where no, maybe not. Oh, I did kill the Reckoner.
Yeah, and then he's
Okay.
going to use that to kill. Well, I guess nothing's getting killed yet. Or the other creatures got chump blocked, I
He's
guess, and
doing
then
3 to
sacked.
me, which now leaves me dead, is the problem.
Yeah.
So going from 17 to 14 is the big difference if I'm still at 17. And I feel like now is when it's kind of dawned on me that like,
Oh, he has Blasphemous Act as his last card, huh?
or that he could top deck it.
All right, let's see if Tom
The thing
finds
is,
it.
there's nothing I can do right now. Like he didn't take enough damage that I can't kill any creatures. So he doesn't even have to block. So I can't get anything off the board to play around Blasphemous Act, which is also one of like the really hard parts of Tom's block is that I think don't doesn't he need to keep 7 creatures exactly on the board?
I think he needs 6 because he Blasphemous Act cost, or is it? I think it's 8 colorless and a red. So
Okay, I thought it was 10 mana, but yeah.
um, and then it might be 9 in a red. I think it's 8 in a red, but it might be 9 in a red. So he's trying to
So now
figure out.
Tom knows he's won, but
He's trying to figure out if you can attack again, but he has to maybe leave all your creatures alive. You know, if he has a chump block with a token or something.
right. But I'm saying like at this point he knows he's like even if he takes all this damage, he goes to 1.
Sure.
And he's got a creature that has pro whatever. So he's got a free block. And now I'm just like, oh, I figured out what's happening. And I'm trying to figure out is there any way I can live, which there isn't. I can't kill the Reckoner. And he can give his aristocrat pro whatever to get through, or he's got 2 flyers. So now I just have to hope that he's trying to top deck it as opposed to
Yeah, not having the
and
lethal on the 11, that's tough. So, all right, so here's cast Blasphemous Act, hold priority, give protection from red to the Cartel Aristocrat, 13 from the Boris Reckoner, 2 from the Cartel Aristocrat. That's going to blow everything up. And then we got a lethal attack coming in, and that'll do it. Tough one, Efro. Sorry, man.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to, there's not a whole lot to talk about. There was a great match between two titans of the game, and a really really hard scenario that I don't know that there was necessarily a right answer to. If you had cast 2 Hell Riders, maybe the blocks have to go differently. Maybe there's a chain reaction. Maybe Tom makes a mistake, and maybe that's the change. And the Aurelia wasn't quite it, but I think Tom sequenced pretty well. His blocks made a lot of sense, and you know, it's another day, another match of Magic, I guess.
Yeah, I think that again, because I'd had no experience really with all of that kind of stuff, I think the hardest part was I was I I don't want to say I knew I won, but I was as confident as I think I'd ever been that this game was going in my favor for basically the whole like once I think I drew the land that I needed for my hand to be functional on turn 1 like right away and
Yeah,
I'm like breathe a sigh of relief and then my draws throughout the rest of the game were like totally fine and I even found like the land to be able to double Hell Rider or really I think I needed that turn
yeah,
and so like everything was kind of lining up so well and in my head it just felt like if I attack with everything and even if he has the worst case scenario that it can't go so badly for me that that I'm gonna lose. I guess
yeah,
that there's gonna be so many creatures that die, or he's gonna take so much damage and have nothing left that it's just not going to work. And I think just so many different like that excitement plus not having played, I guess, much against aristocrats and to really be
uh,
able to survive and that he had so many extra creatures because of the Doom Travelers. I think there's just something I must have missed. Like again, I don't know exactly. I just know I was very confident, and so it was so deflating to just then realize, oh my god, I'm actually going to lose this game that I did not think was losable.
yeah. So I know that you play a lot of poker, so I think you're well versed in the bad beat stories. And This does feel like kind of a bad beat story, you know? One of the bigger ones that kind of maybe went under the radar. Everyone remembers Tom Martell's, Marty Aristocrats deck that Sam Black built and he took down the Pro Tour with. But no one looks back really and sees this match and thinks, wow, Efro got pretty unlucky. You know, the two Boros Reckoners, the Blasphemous Act on the Mold 5, having
But
all
yeah,
those
but
little
I mean,
interactive
I
pieces is
gotta cut you
tough.
off right there because it's not like it is, but it's not like that's one of the biggest things I think I've learned through playing as much Magic as I have is that honestly, if you're really good, like let's say you're really good at Magic, let's say you're the best in the world at Magic, every match you lose is unlucky. It just is because you can define it that way. Like getting a bad matchup when you don't have very many bad matchups in the field is unlucky. Like not mulliganing too much yourself is unlucky. Your opponent's never mulliganing or losing all the die rolls. There's every way in the world to get unlucky. And I think I framed a lot of my career looking at it that way because I could. Like I knew I was always one of the best showing up at these tournaments.
Yeah, I
I felt
agree.
like I was one of the take it down. And I could find the reasons why I got unlucky everywhere. And that was kind of just a crappy mindset that I think held me back for many years to just being a happier person in a lot of ways. And
Good.
so saying that I got unlucky because I lost to his multi 5, which was a perfect 10, is true, but also he multi 5, like that's so lucky. Like
Yeah,
I
I
had
agree.
already I was down 2-1 in games and he mulliganed game 6 and flooded out. That was lucky. Like
Yeah.
obviously, he stalled on lands in that game one where he had a bunch of busted four drops in his hand and had three lands in play. And I found my lands, which was lucky. My game seven hand was kind of a clunker. That could have used, like, I think it was a good keep. And I think that, I mean, it clearly mathematically was a favorite to be a functional hand, but didn't have to be. Like,
Yeah.
that was lucky. Like, there's every way that I got lucky and every way I got unlucky. And, like, at the end of the day, I feel like definitely in that game five, Tom played better. There were definitely things I know I didn't think about, and he planned that last couple turns perfectly to, you know, not only did he kill me, but he could have killed me by more damage. Like he left himself some leeway, a spot that I think was very complicated. And so, he beat me like
Yeah.
straight up. Pay that man his
Pay
money.
that
Like
man his money. Dude,
I
that's
mean,
awesome to hear, man. I'm glad. So I know that a lot of people, back when you were playing a lot, you kind of got a reputation for, I don't want to say complaining because it's not so much the
no,
complaining like you,
it is. You're right.
but
I mean,
I never thought of you like that. I always thought of that as just like you have 5 minutes or whatever after a bad beat or a bad match or a tough spot to vent, and you're using your platform to vent over whatever. But after that, like you're a perfectly normal, level-headed, hyper intelligent human being who just has emotions. And I know that like me, I struggled with tilt for a long time because I used to play all sorts of card games and stuff, and it's hard. It's hard to get out of that mindset sometimes, but sometimes all you need is 5 minutes to just say your piece.
oh yeah, totally. And what you said is completely true. Like this was a thing that I went through for the longest time. It was how I use social media, and it had a number. It was a defense mechanism,
Yeah,
100%. And I've spent a lot of my life getting bullied and having people, you know, treat me shitty, and a lot of that was based on looks and being overweight and stuff growing up. But also I mean, it kind of continued. Like, I won a bracelet first time. I was 21. I
oh
was pushing 400 pounds at the time, and people didn't know who I was. I was not well spoken, and I was young and didn't have success, and people didn't feel like I deserved success. And so I didn't really use much social media. Like, it wasn't obviously a big thing. This was 2005,
yeah,
but there were forums, and my friends would link me to things of people just saying these horrible things about me who had never met me. And so I stopped going to those. Like, I never frequented these type of forums, and I didn't really use any of that form of social media that was available at the time because why would I subject myself to that? And then as Twitter and these other things became more popular, I used them more to vent and also to set up a wall. Like
yeah,
didn't really, it wasn't necessarily a super conscious thing. Like it was partially on my mind at times, but not never on the front of my mind, is that I wanted to keep people away. Like I didn't want anyone to come in. I wanted the people who actually knew me that could get the real me. And, I wasn't like that in real life. And people who've known me for a long time kind of know that that's not really my personality. But I didn't mind putting up that front because also I didn't think about all the negatives.
Yeah.
Like I didn't think about, first off, how it would futurely, impact my relationship with people and my relationship with potential sponsors and anything else down that path. But also, it was actually Patrick Sullivan who pointed out to me when I was complaining about getting unlucky in a match that what I'm ended up doing is I'm taking something away from the person who beat me, who is maybe super excited that, they just beat someone who is considered to be really good at this game. And
Literally in the Hall of Fame. I literally beat Hall of Famer Eric Froehlich, you know?
to diminish their accomplishment is a messed up thing to do, even if it's very unintentional. Or you're not going like, this guy got like, it's just like, oh yeah, mulligan to four, good matchup, blah blah blah. Just something as simple as that is diminishing what they achieved. And yeah, that was just a messed up thing to be doing. And so I definitely started working harder and figuring out introspection and why I was being that way, and just trying to find ways to be a happier person, I guess. Because
That's
honestly, it felt like I needed to justify, like, no, I am great at this.
yeah.
You don't understand. I just got unlucky.
Yeah.
And what is the point of that? Because first off, anyone who cares, or that I should care about them caring, already knows that I'm good at this stuff. I don't need to be explaining that, here's the reasons I got unlucky, like, because nobody actually cares about that part.
I honestly, that's one of the most healthy mindsets I've ever heard anyone having about this game. That's
Took over 30 years, so yeah.
yeah. No, we grow though. We learn, we grow, we lose, we win. It doesn't matter. We learn from those mistakes.
And I still struggle with it. I'm not going to
Same,
claim
same.
to be perfect or anything by any stretch, but it took me a long time to even start thinking about it and to realize the harm that I was causing, not just to the community, but to myself by acting that way.
Well,
Yeah, because to me it was a passing thing. This is a event of 15 seconds, and 1 minute after it happens, I'm just normal and acting like a normal person in real life. But that just lingers out there forever, and that's how people take,
and
that's what people are going to take away,
that's also
and
how
people
most
who look up
people
to you
see
might
you, right?
emulate.
That's how
Yeah,
most people who interact with you on the grand scheme of things, your 10, 20, 30,000 Twitter followers, however many you have, they see, hi, I'm Eric and I lost because of XYZ and it's not my fault. That's all they ever see, right? And so they get this picture of you that's not who you are. It's who you are in the worst 5 minutes of your day, right? And if that's the only time you're posting, if that's the only time you're interacting with other people, it's easy for people to have that image of you. And it's so refreshing to hear you say that that's you've learned and you've grown. And a lot of people who are popping off in chat right now are saying the exact same thing. So just so you know, we're all here for you. We all appreciate the kind words coming out of your mouth and the smart things you're saying and the inspirational things you're saying. A lot of us struggle with this, from your FNMs to your Grand Prix to whatever, that we struggle with just figuring out uh, how to cope with losing. And hearing you say that one of the best in the world just is really, really uplifting. So thank you.
yeah. I mean, I think it's just one of those things that a lot of people are going to struggle with, but also that you can improve with in time. And I think that is my biggest takeaway, is that, again, this was something that went into being 30 plus years old. And, again, I've struggled with those type of demons of growing up, getting bullied and just having people say a lot of crappy things about you. And you just kind of want to put up that wall and that defense mechanism of not letting people in. And the thing for me was that it was really hard for so many years to lose at these events because, and Magic and poker the same way, I use them as an escape. Like
Mm-hmm.
the real world was so hard,
Yep.
which again is tough to say as someone who grew up upper middle class, white, male in this country, like privileged beyond belief in so many ways, and how hard my life is just kind of goes to show how hard everyone's life is. Like no one has it easy, and to kind of recognize that and be more empathetic. But I had so many struggles in life, and once I would get knocked out of a poker tournament and bust out or be eliminated from doing well in a magic tournament, I then had to go back and face that reality, and it just kind of felt like, in a way, the world was kind of crashing down. That my escape right now was over, and that was a hard pill to swallow. And so being able to find more meaningful things in myself and in life was allowed me to see the world in a better way.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing with us your time and your insights, Eric. I really appreciate you joining us for this episode of Time Shift. That's going to do it for this one. Maybe we'll have you back on. Maybe we'll talk about some limited where you had maybe a team Grand Prix victory or something with who are your friends? David Williams and Paul Rietzel usually?
No, that was Sperling.
Oh,
I
that was
mean,
Sperling.
my
Who was your
my
squad?
first. So I talked about the Marshall flashback. He wanted to do a flashback of us winning the Team GP when I was with Luis and Chion,
Oh,
but
nice.
the winning match was me and Luis sitting behind Chion and dictating while he was playing against Ritzel when we won that first GP, and then I don't even know if there was coverage of. I won one with Ben S and Cuneo in Mexico City, but yeah, those are the only two I've won. And I've never actually played with Dave in a team GP. We played in the team PT, me, him, and the Steve. We got fifth, but it cut to top four in the most recent team pro tour. But
Well,
there's definitely some interesting.
apologies for my ignorance on that one. But thanks again for joining us for Time Shift. That's going to do it for us today. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your day. I don't know what to say here. This is the outro. This is the outro. Bye bye.
Show some juicy brisket.